So, a couple months ago, I bought an iMac G3. It's a graphite model, and it had the 600 megahertz processor in it, and it had the better video chip, I should say. And it seemed like a pretty good deal, so I went ahead and bought it on Facebook Marketplace. Well, as you can see, this is how the seller packaged it, and predictably, it arrived with pieces of the inner structure just raining out of the bottom, laying down at the bottom of the box. Being my first iMac G3, I wasn't at first. I was a little confused why there was beige plastic in the bottom of the box. As you see here, I'm kind of like, oh good, it's beige. Well, the computer's not beige, so maybe it's from something else. Unrelated. Oh, the blissfulness of ignorance. At any rate, it came with a Blueberry keyboard. Yeah, it also came with a hub, but no power supply for the hub, so it's kind of useless unless I can figure out what kind of power supply I need. It did come with that HP power supply that does fit in the hole, but do I trust the voltage on that? I mean, I don't. I plug it in and it ruins the hub. Well, I've lost the hub and I don't really care about that, but what am I going to plug into it to test it? So now I'm going to lose one of my flash drives too, or I don't know. So I'm giving that some thought. Maybe I could just plug in a cable and test the voltages and whatnot. That might be an option. But at any rate, so yeah, there's that hub I was talking about. Yeah, look at that. Isn't that fancy? I thought maybe it was an iHub, but it's from some other company. Yeah, at any rate, they threw in a few pieces of software. Printer drivers for printers I don't have, so that's helpful. That print shop might be interesting. I'll have to take a closer look at that later on. It did come with some recovery discs. I've tried to use them, and it tells me there's nothing to recover here. So I don't know what good they really are. The struggles go on and on. There's that print shop. I'm gonna check that out later on when I get an adapter cable for my dot matrix printer. But yeah, there's a close-up of it. See there where the plastic from the inner structure got broken up. And right here, you can see the screen's just a little bit laid back at the top there, the top left corner. The mounts for the CRT had broken loose. And well, ignorantly, I decided the best course of action was just to go ahead and plug it in and turn it on, see if it works. Yeah, here I'm trying to look in it and see if I notice anything broken on CRT or any broken components in there that might be floating around. I didn't really notice any, so I thought, well, let's plug it in. Let's just see. We turn it on here. Huh? It made the sound. Yeah, so it turned on and booted into OS 9.2. I chose the 10.1.3 for startup disk and rebooted it, and it went into Puma just fine. I played around with it for a little while. Let's see. iTunes. Oh, we have to agree to all this. Decline. Yeah, we'll accept. I don't care. Oh, look at there. Look at there. And I thought, well, why am I recording all this? Kind of nonsense to record all this. So I stopped recording. Got busy working with something on my main rig here, and I thought it had gone to sleep, but as it turned out, oh, the screen went dark and it didn't work anymore. Alrighty, roll the poor thing over on its face here and start taking it apart. It was really sad. I took it apart thinking, well, I can just glue those pieces back on, but there was so much pulverized there. All the mounts for the CRT were broken. And now it has an issue how serious is the issue? I'm thinking at this point, if it's something stupid and something simple I can fix, doesn't cost anything to fix, okay, maybe it's worth trying to rebuild the inner structure here. Right? So I go ahead and get it apart, give it a try. And every time I take a screw out, more pieces would just fall, you know. It's like, oh my goodness. So you get more plastic raining down inside this thing every time I turn a screw or loosen a case. So look at that. There's some of the stuff that had fallen down inside of it. At this point, I'm beginning to realize I'm not gluing this back together. It's obvious that's just not happening. There's too many pieces. There's too much dust. Too many missing pieces. So we'll just deal with what is. We have a broken iMac. We were looking for a project. And by God, we have one, right? Okay. All the broken pieces dumped out. Then I took the front off, and that piece broke off. The way that's supposed to come off, you're supposed to take the screws out of the bottom and then kind of swing it up and off of there. And the whole plastic structure is supposed to stay behind, but, well, that didn't work out. So here we are a little further into the teardown. Obviously, didn't really know what I was doing. It didn't much matter at this point. I knew it wasn't going to go back together pretty much, but I hoped against all evidence that I could repair it somehow. So I was poking around on it, and I found a component that had actually been laid over and had a broken solder joint. So I thought, well, that would do it. Not real sure what that is. At any rate, I put it back straighten it back up, and then I'm kind of reflowing the solder and adding some fresh to solder that back on there. After I did that, I actually tested a few of the capacitors that looked like the board was ugly underneath them. I have a cheapy little electronics tester, and so I desoldered a couple of those capacitors there that were near the transformer on that part. And I actually pulled them out of the board and tested them. They tested fine. And I didn't see where the capacitors themselves were leaking. So I don't know what that was on the circuit board. I had assumed it was capacitor juice, but I guess it wasn't. At any rate, I decided I'd just go ahead and put it back together, at least enough to test it out. And so here I am, kind of making the final connections here. Obviously the CRT is just kind of in place. It's not mounted anywhere. Okay, and we're plugging it in. This was kind of nerve-wracking, let me tell you. Yeah, at this point I went ahead and turned it on. Well, as you can see, it made a sound like a television or CRT makes the sound when it first fires up. If you've ever heard it, you know what I'm talking about. It made that sound, and I thought, well, it seems to be powering the CRT, but nothing came up on the screen. So further testing was necessary. As it turned out, I tested the Bolex connector that plugs into the hard drive, and in so doing, I realized that the voltage was low on both the 12 volt and the 5 volt rail. So it must have been the converter board that actually attaches to the motherboard. So now, okay, I don't see anything obviously wrong with it. I could get a cap kit, try fixing it that way, but I don't necessarily know that that's the problem. Okay, so I'm spending money on something I can't even really put back together. The options seem pretty slim. And finally I decided, you know, if I could find another iMac that wasn't all busted up, as another slot load, you know, the same basic design, maybe find a 400 megahertz version, and maybe it's missing some parts or something, right? So I look and I said, I put in the search parameters on eBay, iMac G3 slot load parts or repair, right? So I find a Blueberry that needs a hard drive, has no hard drive, no OS, and it said something about missing some of the screws. And I'm like, I got lots of screws and nothing to put them in. So, well, it's a match made in heaven. So I went ahead and got that Blueberry iMac, and I decided I was going to use the parts from the graphite iMac to upgrade the Blueberry, and I would come up with another project to do with the empty shell of the graphite iMac. Alright, y'all, look here. The second iMac is here. So let's just see what kind of shape it might be in here. The box is in better shape than the last one was. Maybe this one won't be all busted up. I sure hope not. I sure hope it isn't all busted up. Here we go. Full of peanuts. That might be a good thing. Let me go get a box or something, put those peanuts in. The Blueberry iMac. Oh, diggity dog. So we can see, and I believe this was here, that was there before he ever shipped it. It does have a little bit of a chunk broke out of it. Oh, nice. Well, there's that. Is that the one? Looks like maybe it is. I wonder if I can glue it back in. We'll hold on to that. Figure out what the iMac on the desk there began to disassemble. You take those screws out so you can remove the bottom of it. That'll give us access to the hard drive and well, basically the whole motherboard for that matter. There goes the bottom. Now the RFI shield was just sitting on there, no screws in it, so I guess that's some of the missing screws they were talking about. Okay, you have to take out all these screws in order to get the motherboard out. They go around the perimeter, and there's a couple next to the RAM slots. Okay, obviously a jump cut. We didn't get them all out, but yeah, you'd have to take them all out to remove the motherboard. Also got the cable for the hard drive and the optical drive. Okay, this part here, we're going to get ready to remove the power converter, power supply board portion for the motherboard there. There's a little plastic fastener of some sort. Not real sure what you call it, but it's the one where you have to pull the core out of it, and then you can push the plastic sleeve out. So that's me trying to lift the center part of it, just to kind of get it opened up a little bit. Now I'll get my little pick and I'll try to push that through from the other side with it. I managed to work right off camera for the most part, but I got a little bit of it on the video for you. So as you can see, I'm just kind of pushing that through. And I believe this is the 600 megahertz motherboard and processor that we're going to be putting in the machine here. Just got to get it lined up, and then I'll give it a push, and there it goes. Finally released. So Now we can flip it, and there's a little push to release deal on that connector there. So you kind of pick it up a little bit, get it off the latch, and then give it a wiggle, and apart she will come. So I didn't know for sure if this was a bad part, but I knew the other one was good because I had tested it, which I didn't film, and it did boot up to a the little question mark Mac, basically telling you that there's no hard drive. So there you go, setting the bad one aside, and there's a good one going on. Well, we don't know if it's bad, but it could be. So we'll put a known good one on there, and that way we'll eliminate the drama for the Blueberry anyway. Yep, get it in there till it snaps, and then you got to put that little plastic deal that we fought with coming apart there. You got to push it through. So now that that's in place, all that's left to do is remount the motherboard. Now there are two connectors on there. You see one down the lower left, and there's also one at the top of the motherboard there. It's probably not quite as obvious. Once you get the connectors lined up, then you can push it together to make the connection. Then hopefully you got everything lined up and you can go ahead and put your screws in. I'm not real sure what the heck this thing is, but it was where I'm putting it, so I'll put it back there. I think it might be the cable for the microphone that this computer doesn't have, so I guess they just kind of put it there to hang it out of the way. The graphite had a microphone. Alright, screws going in. I thought that long shank screwdriver would get me far enough away where I could actually get a few shots of what I was doing. Here I am getting the cable loose from the 400 megahertz setup. And this is mounting the hard drive right here. So I had to go through my little collection of screws and find some screws that would fit the hard drive. So this is the 40 gig hard drive that came out of the graphite. And so we're mounting that. We'll probably upgrade that to an SSD later on. Maybe not, I don't know. Seems to work great. Doesn't make any noise or anything. Yeah, it's kind of a tight quarters there to try to get that drive cable in place there, but it's doable. Just got to have some patience, which runs thin after a little while. Okay, so I got that in place, and I think I flipped it over and actually tried to run the computer and see what would happen, only to find that the hard drive wasn't working. Then I remembered I never connected the Molex, so don't forget that if you're going to do something like this. Alright. And it booted into Puma. Now, I would have almost liked to have kept this installation, except for the previous owner had set passwords and stuff, and every time I wanted to make a change it was like asking me for this person's password, which I did not know. So that's why I went ahead and made a clean install. Now I didn't have a copy of Puma, but I already had a copy of Tiger. Tiger works very sluggishly on my iBook that runs at 300 megahertz, but I thought with this one running at 600 megahertz, I thought it would be okay. It is okay, but some of the games will run kind of slowly. So I may actually put Panther on another partition at a later time. Yeah, here we go. I was bringing up the specs here. It shows that it's actually running at 600 megahertz down there towards about the middle of the screen here. And then also I was noticing I have 256 megabytes of RAM, 16 megabytes of video memory on this one, and I think the 400 has 8 megabytes, but I'm not entirely sure. So I decided I would shut it off because I forgot to put the battery in when I had it over the first time. So we rolled it back over and we put the PRAM battery in. I had ordered that when I got the carbon, and well, obviously we didn't use it for the carbon, for the graphite. Then I'm going through the sticks of RAM trying to figure out which is which, and what we might could combine to make the most memory possible. It looked like the graphite just had like 128 megabytes of RAM in it, so 264 megabyte sticks. So what I ended up doing with that was I stuck one of those 64 megabyte sticks in there for a little bit while I ordered two 512 megabyte sticks. Yeah. Ended up going back to set the time twice because, well, somehow or another I got an hour off on the hour, and also I forgot to make it PM instead of AM on the clock. So anyway, we make that quick correction, and it does retain the date and time now with the new battery. Alright, go ahead and shut it down. It's time to put it back together since it works. So first thing I had to do was scrounge up some screws for that RFI shield there. Yeah, I just dumped the bag in the lid for my iFixit screwdriver kit there. Yeah, I dug out the little gold screws that went in the RFI shield. I'm calling it an RFI shield. At any rate, the little Faraday cage that goes around the motherboard. How about that? Alright, so it just kind of has some clips that you line up in the front, and then you put the screws in the back. I believe there's a couple screws go in there next to that front prop deal that props it up in the front. I see some holes there. I don't think I put screws in them. So there's a project for next time. It has a sticker on there, so I decided while it was in this position it'd be a good time to take that sticker off. A bunch of residue from the sticker. Yeah, I kind of cleaned at it a little bit, just kind of polished that turd up a little bit. Get the peanuts off the screen. Yeah. I realized I was looking at how we might go about fixing the cracks and holes in the inner structure that's on this one. It's far more complete than what we had with the graphite, for sure. So, all right, next thing I do is make some room. Put it out in the shed to store it in case we need it someday. Alright y'all, so here is the computer. I've upgraded it to 1 gigabyte of RAM. I've also installed Tiger, and of course the classic inside of Tiger. And I split the hard drive in half, so it's got about 20 gigs for Tiger and OS 9. And it also has a backup partition. So in case something happens to the first one, well, I have a backup. We can talk about another time why that was necessary, but at any rate, we have a Blueberry iMac that runs at 600 megahertz, has 1 gig of RAM, Got 10.4 and also 9.2. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah, in the next video, we'll talk about what we do with the graphite iMac and how we did it, and we'll kind of go through all that. Then we got to come back to this one, and probably a third video we'll come back to this one, and we can talk about what we need to do with this, because let me show you how wonderful these speakers sound. We'll just crank it all the way up. New game. So, obviously, that needs some work. And I have a plan. Don't know how well it's going to work out, but I do have a plan. So in the next one, we do with the Blueberry, we will definitely be fixing those speakers. See if we can patch up the cracks in the inner structure. Hopefully it won't all crumble while we roll it around trying to get to that. I think this one's going to come out a little better. At any rate, thank you for watching, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss these upcoming episodes, because they're going to be pretty good, I think. All right, with that, we'll see you in the next one. Y'all take care.